is coming on. While we introduce ourselves in chat, I encourage us to do that over in chat, please. I welcome to share any announcements or new happenings in your part of the world. I'll introduce myself in chat.
I'll start with just like a teeny tiny observation is that, Gina, I get a sense that you're doing like a push on clean social media. Seen some stuff popping around in places I wasn't used to seeing it. So that's kind of fun. And then related to social media, I, of course, seeing a whole lot of activity out of the US ACE Coalition on social, which is great, and seeing new connections happening there too. So yay team.
Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say, clean social media doesn't have too big of a following, so I'm trying to ramp up our followers and our engagement. So every time I see AMS share one of our posts, I get really excited. So thank you. Clean technically has an Instagram, but it hasn't been very active. I would say probably within the next 6 months, it will get started again.
I have a bunch of shares that are related. I'll just drop the links in the chat as I share. So a new STEM teaching tool on racism and how we confront it in science learning was released. It's really exciting to finally get that one out. Of course, we had to think carefully about how we're handling that. So it's been some time since we sort of worked through that, and there's a number of others coming. We are also reorganizing. I don't have it to share with you today, but it should be up by the end of the week. We are reorganizing. I'll give you a sneak peek at it, but this won't be the stable link. We are reorganizing our climate related resources into one space that we're going to call Climate Ed Tools. But it'll have a home spot on the STEM teaching tools site. So this is the draft space. Please don't share this broadly yet. And so I do see that they did a bunch of changes. I asked them. And so that should be up by the end of the week. Really exciting. And then probably the most exciting in terms of things that came out. I don't know if you saw it, just got released yesterday morning. We had a special issue of Connected Science Learning, and the initial issue was put out in September, but the whole issue is done now. And let me just get the right link here. And it's on climate justice learning. So we're very excited about that. And I think that's all the sort of local US related stuff. Last thing is we just got asked yesterday to host the Adaptation and Resilience Day for the UN Paris Committee on Capacity Building Network at the COP meeting. So myself and Chris Cameron here in our nonprofit got asked to host that because of the work we've been doing inside the PCCB network for the last year or so. And so we're meeting with them tonight about that, but we're very excited because we're able to pull in some folks from Climate Justice Worldwide and some of the folks in Clio Institute. Actually, Frank, we have one of the folks from Clio Institute who's one of the Climate Generation Fellows. She's going to be on the panel with us on the 5th. So we're very excited about that too.
I just left the panel discussion with Climate Generation before this call on window into COP, and Julieta was in that call. So hey, look at that. We all network and not work it together, and good things happen.
Eric, you can go.
Thanks, Devarty. Sorry, I apologize. I have to jump off the call to actually go take some video for this COP project I'm working on in conjunction with digital storytellers. So I wanted to share this story script that I'm working from. It's a 3-minute video, so it's really short, and then a few background documents. And if anybody can chime in the next, it's sort of time sensitive, obviously, but but if anyone can chime in the next couple of days, shoot me an email just on your feedback, thoughts. It's going to be a series of interviews with some Oakland students, teachers, and administrative folks, and it's going to tie to the connection between gardens, urban gardening, community gardens, and climate change, carbon sequestration, that kind of thing. And then one special request, Frank, I'm looking for a really cool animation that kind of shows the Bay Area environment, sort of the Bay Area Mediterranean climate system, and any resources that would speak to why we're in such a severe drought, perpetual drought. So, what's going on sort of meteorologically that kind of puts us in this predicament, and why does NOAA and NASA forecast that it's just going to be worse? So, and this is, I know it's like an 11th hour request. So this is part of a larger potential project. Again, this is only a 3-minute video, so it's not, we're just doing the best we can in the short time frame that we have.
So Eric, I'm gonna come right back at you. If you want to email Tom DeLiberto, he is the climate scientist for climate.gov, and he's super talented. And if there's anybody who's going to know the answer to that question, it's going to be Tom DeLiberto. So okay. Go with Tom.
Awesome, thanks so much. And I'll put a bunch of docs in the chat right now. Thank you.
Eric, I also posted the link that we're in the process. We're building the plane and flying it. So like Eric's creating video, and people all over the world are doing this right now. And like by Friday, it will really be like, poof, this beautiful website. So like the prototype of the website is up. I just shared it with you. But again, we're not sharing it broadly in social media yet until the weekend. And that's where like the videos from Eric and a whole bunch of other things will be posted into that space.
James, your hand is up.
Great, thank you. So let's see, a couple of the things, and if there is time, would say if people want to talk any about these two conferences just happened. The more important one that I really would recommend everybody at least have some knowledge of is the Aztec conference, the big science museum conference that influences all of us. A smaller one is the California Association for Science Educators. So that's the science education one for California. It's just, they're like the small version of NSTA. Certainly the largest state, and one that historically has been important, and there were developments there, including from Oakland's teachers and so on. So if that's of any interest and there's time, but in any case, they happened. I took really good notes. I mean, we really have any information people want from it up to a point of not having the STC say, wait a second, you're telling people everything that happened in our conference. That's not right. We're not going that far, but basically can drill into anything that happened. Thanks.
Any other announcements? Shares? Frank, anything new?
Something's about to be new, but I'm not sure when it's going to get released. But the inventory of ACE at the federal level for the United States is, I have the final documents. I'm just waiting for NOAA to figure out how they actually get released and reviewed. So Deb, I saw some dancing over there, but we're very close to that. And I just got word that we are funding something that I think you'll all be interested in, is the development of a theory of change for how climate empowerment accelerates climate action for the United States. So Knology will be doing the lead work, but we're just developing a straw theory of change to allow the community to then respond to that. But we don't have a theory of change of how we know education leads to accelerated climate action, and how training plays a key role, and how public access and public participation. We don't have a theory of, we talk about it like there's a theory of change, but we actually haven't generated one. And so I've funded the beginning of the development of a theory of change that it would be what everyone would respond to through community process. But I think we need to have a very clear shared understanding of how that process actually works if we're really going to do the full work of what we think Clean and other networks are working towards. I mean, it's great for the international level, but it's so vague. we don't have it down. Of course, time to bark. We don't have it down in an actionable way that we would come together. So that's something I'm funding as we speak.
Frank, if I could, a question on that. Would you be in favor, would you think it a good idea if that actually is a topic in Clean? Because that's a really big deal. That's really important. And, you know, I mean, I guess I want to applaud that you're funding that and you're doing that. Is that could be a topic? I mean, that's no small thing you're doing.
It's premature, right? Let's get into it. I think once we have go from we are intending, and we have a version, and then we go into community process where we actually get a, you know, I've watched this before where we go into community too early, and then, sorry, of course, clearly there's some reason to bark right now. But you know, I think definitely down the road, but if in all the collective impact research I've done, it does look like having a shared goal actually allows catalytic work to move from what you used to be to something new. And you know, and that's what I'm trying to figure out, how to do that and do it well and get it started. And so we will, I would say April is when we'll have the straw theory of change. And maybe I should use another grain other than straw, but that's what I got for now. But so Jim, definitely, you know, this is something to track. And as we make progress, it will be really important to have community push on it. And so it is co-developed.
I'm sure you know about diffusion of innovations theory. Do you? Okay, good. Because that's what I've used all my life and it really works.
Yes.
So Diffusion of Innovations by Everett Rogers was the seminal book.
Agreed.
What did someone say? There were a couple topics for discussion. There's, I'm sorry, it was my dog who started the bark and then I could hear it with your dog's respond through Zoom. What is her name or his name? Frank?
This is Rico.
Rico.
He's a hairy Bernedoodle.
Oh.
Nice.
Sheds like you wouldn't believe.
And obviously is so spoiled, Frank. Oh my
He is.
Did I hear? Oh, look, there's another one. What's the name over there, Colleen?
This is Annie. I've got two more hanging around too, but this is the one who's putting up with me, pulling me in my lap.
Annie looks like she might have a little collie, you know, short-haired
Yeah,
collie.
she's also, I have Tolstoy Shepherds and a Husky German Shepherd mix. Yeah.
Mine ran away after getting all your dogs agitated. He just ran away. He's a rescue from Alabama, and this is his first winters in Minnesota. He's very confused. There are cold days and he doesn't step out, and there's warmer days when he loves it, and then the next day he's so excited, and then it's cold and he's like, what is this? So there were a couple topics, or I will just go back to Frank about digging what we were talking about, the theory of change, because it's very, very interesting. Environmental ed theories and STEM ed and science ed have always written about action, knowledge, awareness, and action. So I would like to go dig deeper into that. And I wonder what others think in their experiences and their knowledge banks. Go ahead, Ginger.
We can't hear you, Ginger.
Oh,
Oh, now we can.
okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. So there was, for a time, because I'm primarily in a communications world, not an education world, but there was this community-based social marketing was all the rage in the, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s. And there's a researcher at, I don't know, McGill or somewhere in Canada, Douglas Mackenzie Moore, and they did a lot of community-based social marketing around environmental behaviors, recycling, not idling, those sorts of very discrete environmental topics. And interestingly, just in the last few months, he seems to have really revived his programming, and he's back out beating his drum again. And within the Department of Ecology in Washington, I can fully attest to the fact that when our staff stopped going to those trainings and we stopped investing in those types of marketing techniques, i.e. public education, our recycling rates dropped, our littering rates increased. I mean, it would be really, really, I think when you're looking for proof about change, the theory of change, maybe actually doing a lit search in the community-based social circles would be where you could get some very verifiable data on how education, even though they're calling it marketing, how education has changed behavior.
Ginger, that's a critical, what I've been looking at is all the ways that this works, right? Every form of education, every form of training in media and awareness, every form of building social capacity, public participation, participatory democracy. I mean, the threads that need to be brought together into a coherent whole toward a outcome is really what I'm looking at. And so, what I find is most people come from something and they lean in with that thing that they think as a key piece. And it is a key piece. What I'm trying to find out is if we all brought what we have together in a coordinated way, could we actually get a collective impact that is toward a goal that needs to happen, right? And so what is that goal? And can we articulate that if you don't do these key pieces of action, don't expect a 1.5 degree or an 80% reduction in carbon emissions. Just don't expect it. If you're serious, these things would be coordinated and invested in. And what's really interesting about the kind of the sojourn that we've gone in with ACE as the international framework is that it's beyond education. Intentionally. And so everything we do in education is critically important, but especially when you do it in concert with these other actions. So, I mean, the example you're giving is a perfect illustration of how that works. And I would imagine with recycling, as an example, the connection to schools and how does what happens in a school relate to what happens in a family and in a community. So these are naturally woven together.
Maybe I'll add to that a little bit. So I think my one caveat here, and I've already told Frank this, so he knows it, is just really thinking about like the emergent work in learning sciences and organizational change theory. So like organizational change theory work coming out of Finland from Angerson's group, and some of the learning sciences work by Michael Cole and others, Chris Gutierrez and others, has really talked about social movement theory and like how social movement theory actually counteracts some of the original work, not counteracts, but like it just nuances and complicates some of the original work around diffusion models, because we can leapfrog diffusion by creating multiple nodes of work that are centers of networking and effort. And it connects a lot to the work that who is it? And Tony Leiserowitz has done related to understanding and thinking about climate action efforts because of communication pathways. So like learning from a trusted messenger to be able to, so that like learning in relationality, learning across networks of relationality, that those things are actually a little bit different, but connected to some of the diffusion work that was done.
Deb, do you have any favorite papers on social movement theories?
Do, oh, go ahead, Doherty.
I was just saying we had this discussion one time and Emily Cohen was just sharing some papers and I should have shared. This is such a coming back to that moment. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's easier for me to like make it more coherent than to drop one or two here because there's like the field itself, which, you know because this is the challenge we've been facing for the last 2 years of like, there's no paper in this area. And the one that is that people keep referencing is not very critical. And so like, trying to figure out how to synthesize this work has been a big challenge. And like the Nest network and the Smithsonian, I'm working with them around socioscientific issues right now. And like literally same problem, like how you even define the field creates the tension of how we define which things to draw on and which things not to, because there's so much, like Ginger's saying, there's work coming out of like all these different areas that we can leverage across into this space. And so really, if we're going to do a deep move to do that, we kind of should like systematically look at change theories across the space. Megan Bang has done a recent piece around like social movement, climate action and eco justice kind of things as social movement. So I have to let me dig it out, but I think there's like a reading list kind of move here.
Maybe we need a symposium, go back to the Plato style of where just like, let's just all take the same dive together so we can all get leveled on this. Because I mean, ultimately that's what we're talking about is social movement. It's a people problem. It's not a technology problem. It's not an environmental problem. It's a people problem. And if people don't change, then we get the same thing we've had heading, and science is known. So we've got to figure out how do people change? How do groups of people change? And how do you do it intentionally with the urgency of the moment? That's the challenge that's sitting before us, right? And then other things are in service of that.
James, please.
Yeah, so let's see. What I'm thinking of is drifting as Diffusion says things, and I'm agreeing with Glenn. Where I was first going to say something, and so I'll adjust to it, is wanting to respect what Frank said when I asked the question, should we have a talk about this? And saying, okay, if Frank and Noah and folks are going to put together a review, let's then have public discussion of it. So I guess I want to recognize that and want to respect that it's not. This isn't a matter of we're taking you in the back corner, Frank, and making you discuss it now. I don't think any of us want to do that.
Any day.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the first one. If I'm going to say some things, but that's not where I'm going. When, as often is the case, when Deb brings something up, I'm not in my head and thinking like Deb, right? I mean, and you responded to it, Frank, too. Maybe one way to back up on it is, okay, we're talking about education, we're talking about communication. We would agree on that. Now, Deb and I would be among those who would say we need a movement. This has to be something like ending slavery. This has to be like civil rights. This is not something just let's talk about it and let's educate and then we'll vote on it and it'll all be solved. This is more like a social movement, right? This is a big thing that has to happen involving things. But I just kind of went into what I'm promising not to do, Frank, is like this theory of change. What kind of change are we talking about? The theory is a big difference. For those of us who openly say we think there needs to be social movement, I have to recognize there's some people who would say, wait, no way. That's not what we're funding here. You don't teach that in the schools, right? And there's some people who will probably want to kill us for doing that. That's we have to respect that and do that. So not everybody's going to be on board with it being a social movement, but Deb and I think a lot of other folks are going to say, well, as long as we can speak, that's what we're going to speak for. So, and I don't see a social movement being in conflict of being a scientist. I mean, who were some of the, one of the social movements that was under my belt when I was younger is trying to prevent thermonuclear war. And who were among the leaders who did that were scientists, right?
Gosh,
one of my big heroes.
Me too.
Yeah. I mean, one of my big heroes, one of the persons I followed is Carl Sagan. I mean, he was big influence in my life. There's many others too, but it's no mistake that Carl Sagan was a leader against thermonuclear war and one of the ones that first brought up climate change, right? There is no conflict to being a scientist and being for something that matters. Ask Albert Einstein. He was not, oh, I have nothing to say about politics or world war or things like that. So, but anyway, I fully recognize, though, that there's people, and there's going to be pressure. One else I want to recognize, too, is we have to protect Frank's back. He does so much for all of us. No, Frank, I don't mean that lightly. You do so much for all of us. Your role and you as an individual, you're under some political pressures that
Worry, Jim.
You can't be under the federal government without having to say there's going to be some senator from some state who's not going to like what you said. Well,
Jim, don't worry about it, because I have a NOAA scientific integrity and political interference policy that is over top of me. NOAA, look, if it ever happens, bring it. Seriously, we're in this we are talking about really significant issues. And if people want to play games, I've been preparing for testimony and getting grilled ever since I took this job. Full stop, right? And the NOAA, I'm the liaison to the scientific integrity and political interference policy for the communication, education, engagement in the climate program office at NOAA, right? So I'm ready. Not to say it's going to be, but Jim, the most important thing that this group brings is partnership, right? Because it's not like, we need to do this. As one of the key things that Kristen said in her opening haiku going into COP26 was, we must work together. This is all must work together stuff. And so the greatest contribution that everyone does in this community, and this is recorded, is that that we roll up our sleeves and do the work together. And the only way we can do that is if we know about each other and understand what's going on. And so one of these days, Colleen, I'm going to figure out how to work with you in Alaska, right? I'm game any day, right? Because we have a complicated, large country, and work is going to be uneven. We're going to make progress certain places, and we'll get to other places later on. But Jim, the most important thing in all of this is that we do it together. So, I appreciate that, but I'm solid.
Okay. So, Frank, would it be fair to say some people have, I'm trying to show a Sharpie, some people have Sharpies, but we still have science, and we're gonna do our thing. Is that fair enough?
Just do the work. It's just, what's the Belichick's rule in football? Do your job, right? Just do your job, and got it. I got my job in front of me, on it.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna give you one little pushback, though, is we work as a team, we work as a thing, but it also means we have each other's back. When someone comes under attack for doing their job, they have us to answer to, not just you or Deb.
That's fine. Jim, I appreciate it, but the real value is the collaboration. And, just the fact that every now and then Deb will pop off some line of new research, and I'm like, what? It helps us all. But, just the previous call with climate generation, there are people that are just like, oh, I've got this answer. Oh, what about this piece? It's just collaborative, right? And that's where this gets to be beautiful and good work gets done, because we collaborate. So that's why these calls keep on happening since 2008, because we learn from each other and we have each other's back, and we get it done together.
Yes, I'll say that I feel very much like I'm always playing catch up with all of you, which is why I often just sit here and listen, because I don't have as much background. But I would love to, I say that because that just means that I feel like I got a great group of people to fall back on if I, want to do something or have an idea or want to do stuff. It's like, yeah, let's make this happen. I know who to call.
Like the bat signal goes off, and you're like, Oh, it's coming from Alaska today.
And I don't mean to disrespect the raising the hand thing, but just also, Colleen, I had the chance when preparing the Aztec conference, even though each person got like literally 2 seconds, I wanted to make sure what we put up on the screen for those 2 seconds for REAP was representative. So I got to go through your program and review that and things. I would say, though, that if there's somebody in our community that we do have to have their back, it's you. I mean, for gosh sakes, you're working in Alaska. There are real big pushback against the stuff that you rightly do. And you also, I mean, there's also a difference between you and what I have to do in DC or California is I can pretty well steer as much as I can away from certain influence that you're going to have to negotiate and work around. You can't go into a museum in Alaska and not deal with people who put things in pipelines. Let's say that. Okay.
Yeah, and it's such, because there are so few people up here, it's not like you can avoid someone who's on a first name basis with Lisa Murkowski. Like it's not like you can avoid that. I mean, her brother is on our policy committee at REAP, like it's not like we can avoid these things at all or try to fly under the radar, even if you're not being obvious about it. So that's another struggle, but that's one of the beauties of focusing on the solutions, right? On the energy side of things and talking about solutions and other benefits that are not necessarily just for climate change, even though, like I've said before, that's our main motivation at REAP. We can still talk about the other major benefits because it's so intersectional, right? I mean, we're talking about the costs and the benefit to communities and the benefit to especially BIPOC communities and Alaska Native communities without even having to mention climate change barely.
And a reflection, so maybe to take it off of you for a second, but the thing, so in that the solution that I tend to work on with our students is, or more, the action, the number one what we'll then do is energy efficiency, that is STEM, right? So naturally, I have a lot of relation with energy efficiency focused large national programs. I can mention the one, but maybe it's not necessary, but one I work with and had a nice long discussion with him when I'm in DC. And he's telling me that they have to clear everything with the American Petroleum Institute. Right? What they teach, what they do. There's someone on the board, American Petroleum Institute, who gets to veto something they're doing. And that, I'm glad I finally got that conversation with him because that's what I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn the stuff we're doing. What's the pushback you're going to get in your organization if you relate to us? Because we've got students taking action on climate change and energy. That's different than just going to Congress and lobbying, which is what they do. And he's basically telling me, yeah, we got to clear it with API.
Yeah.
And maybe if I give another one, when I just came off of the California Association for Science Educators, so I'm looking at who is teaching climate, who's teaching energy in California, the whole state. If you measure who is teaching at that conference, I mean, who is the people who are presenting everything on energy at the California Association for Science Education? It's NEED, and if you want to take a look at who funds NEED, take a look at their sponsors. I don't have to give you some digging through and finding the secrecy. You look at who's funding them. It's one bunch with a few folks. Now there's somebody in there there are people in there who are really good, but you're not the ones who. Those are people, not the ones who are calling the shots. So I mean, again, I don't. That's looking up for back is I don't want to put somebody in the line of fire on here. But if you look at the major players for who is deciding how energy is taught in California, it's it. And if you look at what was taught at that conference, it's straight out what those folks want taught. They are deciding what the kids in California will be taught. If you take that as a measure. And a lot of what's done with all their money is they push aside anybody else. There's other programs that we're used to having at AGU, like among the clean people, and they're basically being put out of business, just straight up being put out of business by these folks. It's like they have no air because they don't have the kind of money to do that. So anyway, I mean, there's a lot going on right now, and our group is really important to. I mean, the first place, we're a forum, right? We're just discussing this. It's not necessarily coming in and taking a side or saying somebody's bad or someone doesn't, but being able to talk about where the influence and the funding comes from on education, that's a valid subject. Who is sponsoring the major education in the country? And the federal government is one of the major sponsors, but I would love it to be the major one, but it's not. It isn't the dominant sponsor anymore.
Yeah, and I think, Jim, to add on to that, the flip question that I'm hearing more and more these days, unfortunately, is not just who is sponsoring it, but who is prohibiting it, and how are they getting in the way of prohibiting it. So who's sponsoring the bills that are inhibiting climate change learning and education? And it might be in a number of different ways. So we're seeing things now that are efforts around, like, very much a cultural war inside education, around understanding justice in the context of learning, understanding how climate is named or framed inside those efforts. And so, it's polarizing different states, but that's happening at the state legislative level, but it's not necessarily uniform within the state. So we're leaving a lot of educators really vulnerable in states where they want to teach things that are in line with national standards, that are in line with the best science available, and yet are being prohibited in a number of ways by their state actions. And whether those challenges go forward in some legal fashion to actually question, for whatever reason, schools are the battleground for much of this type of work. And so we've got to kind of, personally, I think, from the social movement perspective, one of the things that we need to do is we need to step outside schools, and we need to broadly educate communities now, right now. And we need to do it hard and significantly about the idea that, first of all, schools are being used as a battleground around climate learning. Climate learning is essential, writ large. Get involved in your school and figure out how you want that to unfold, and get involved in your state and figure out how you want that to be constrained or not. So.
The other side of that coin, though, is that that's not happening everywhere. This is why I was trying to get at before about we've got a crazy country when it comes to this stuff, because it's incredibly decentralized. And so while you might have that challenge happening in one dynamic over here, then you go to another state like Washington State or New Jersey, and you get a very different dynamic. And so we have to be agile and understand that what's going on, and sometimes what's happening that is most consequential is actually below state unevenly. And then sometimes it's even below that unevenly. And so it is an incredibly fractal strategy we have here in front of us. But it's not one strategy. It's a series of, it's not an endless number, but it's a number of them. And I think that we need to always be ready for which dynamic are we looking at, and what kind of progress can we make here. At the end of the day, while the battleground is in the schools, the youth are really pushing for something fundamentally different than what they're getting. And where that's coming from isn't from the school. And so, it puts it, there's one group pushing on the school one way, and then the internal pressure from students and parents is pushing another way. And so teachers are sitting at a very hot pressure point. They're like little diamonds right now. There's so much pressure coming at them from all different directions. And my heart goes out to anybody who's still a teacher, anybody listening to this, because it is an incredibly hard job, and it's only getting harder. But at the end of the day, that learning will let go. Eventually this will let go, but let's make progress where we can. And so I think, Deb, your point about how do we look at a community approach of this, and that's how you build supports for teachers, and that learning is not just the teacher's responsibility. It's not. But that means you're working at a community approach, including schools, as opposed to your solution is what happens in classrooms. That's only part of the equation. And that's part of what we need to kind of, like, I've seen this evolving over the years, and we're finally really getting there. And so Seth, I'm glad you joined, because, you know, we had a conversation with the 10th year anniversary of Climate Generation with some of the teachers. It was before you got there. And what they said was the most important thing you could do to help us teachers in the classroom who are trying to do the right thing by teaching climate for our students is focus on the community. Don't focus on me, because I'm ready to go. But the people, all the pressure dynamics around me is what's going to make it harder for my teacher across the hallway, who might not have the same clarity of purpose on this issue. And, you know, and so like the work around the teachers in virtuous and helpful ways, as opposed to let's get the teachers and then they'll be ready. It's just too hard for most of them. And so work the community around them, and that will actually enable them to be their best teaching selves on climate.
Couple of things to support that. I think I'm supporting that, Frank, is the success we've had in DC and at the schools, that as it's opened up, that we have a way that our students are not just making their school more energy efficient as a openly climate action, but they're working to make all of DC climate. I mean, you know, having the Smithsonian, having the U.S. Capitol become more climate energy efficiency because of our action of our students, that has inspired the entire Montgomery County, where they're adopting our technique, that their students can do the same. And not just in Montgomery County, but back to D.C. I mean, that's a county of 1 million people. That's bigger than San Francisco. You know, that's bigger than 6 other states. And they're getting it that their students, what they're recommending to their schools is, let's make this a whole community. Let's make this a whole county-wide thing we're working on together. It does really inspire people. If I might mention something of coming from a program, because Lowell School, I'm not just speaking for myself. This is Lowell School looks at it this way: of climate action is fine. We have many teachers doing things. We are using the nature of the school and the community around it that supports it. You know, utilizing that, working with it. But it's also a school that this is not a new idea to get into diversity and equity and inclusion. This is fundamental to how the school does things, and we teach it. And that's a big part of how we educate. We do things. We're going to, from somebody who's coming openly about, we do need a movement. We're going to do science education. We're going to do holistic education, but it needs to be a movement, and we support that. Is how much of there is a perfect alliance with social justice and fighting racism. And this is one aspect of it. If we approach things just by who has the most money and everything, we're going to get a certain demographic and leave out many parts of the community. If we are in the community and we're deliberately making sure that people of color have a voice and are able to be in STEM and do things, now we're bringing in communities, and one in particular is the African American communities. If you want a social movement, you want people who historically know how to fight for things like civil rights. You want history. You want families. You want culture that fights against slavery. If you exclude those communities, how well prepared are you going to have a movement? And what kind of a movement what kind of movements come out of the United States that are all white? What do those movements tend to look like? What do diverse movements look like? What are ones that tap into the culture? There's a very different thing. And I guess what I'm getting at is diversity, and working that way actually strengthens the climate movement in so many ways that we lose if we accept that the people who have the most money and the access to education and all that, which tend to be white, those are the people we target. Is that? So again, Frank, I do mean to come back to me, I think that's a piece of wisdom that you're opening up, that you're speaking to. If I have, there's this quite, you want to be careful when you say you agree with somebody, that they have to have a chance to say, actually that's not the way I look at things, right? That's not speaking for me, right? Do you see what I mean? That's being respectful. You don't say I agree with somebody and then take what they said and put it in a whole different direction, which often happens in our society, right? So anyway, now I'm starting to ramble, and it's time for me to shut up.
What I really enjoy about these informal talks is that we dip into research and practice equally. It's like a constant ebb and flow, and we go from, interestingly, environmental education literature, then science ed literature, STEM ed, justice talks, and then practitioner-based conversations. And it is a very good this on a Tuesday afternoon. It's very motivating. It probably carries me all the way to Friday. And guys really start losing motivation on Thursday afternoons. So I do love this big picture. It's like, okay, this is what we do, and this is where I stand in this big, cosmos of things and what moves forward. So thank you for sharing everything. Thank you for sharing the resources, Deb. I did notice that comment from Frank about that paper, Megan Banks' paper. I don't think that was the paper that you referred to. So was it? That's like a little disconnect in the conversation. You were referring to a paper, then Frank found that paper, posted that paper. Was that paper that followed that thought, or was it not? Just fix my I have.
We
Was it?
did got 8 papers in 2021, so I'm like,
I know. What's
Yeah, no, that's the one though. Leah Bricker now is over at Spencer as the head of programs, director of programs, or something like that.
but isn't this a commentary, or is there a paper to it? Is there a different paper?
Yeah, so this is the commentary one that's really thinking about like how we think and design around this, but it's based on a bazillion other things that they reference in it that are synthesizing their work across, like her work on, she has, I think, 3 or 4 papers that you can easily locate that are about like community-based sort of research and design efforts that all focus on essentially like what Jim's been talking about, like that local move of design work in justice collaborations to shift and move the world. And it's not, just to be clear, like as I say this, I'm like, and most of you know me from like the work that I do together, but like I am all about like building networks and figuring out how to like leverage like the power and distribute it differently in different new ways. But what is also really apparent in working with EJ communities and climate justice communities is that, white environmentalism timelines are not necessarily understood. Time is, and not understood, that's not the right way. They're not thought about the same way. So like if you've been living with 4 centuries of colonization and environmental injustice, you just think differently about time, and you already had cultural differences and roots in time. And so like how we understand and shift our climate, and even the rhetoric we hear right now, like we have to do by 2030 or it's all over. I'm like, it's not all over, people. Like there still will be people there. It's just will be a really shitty situation that we live in. Apologize for that. And so like the choices we make today, of course, impact our tomorrow and globally, but like how we understand and motivate each other to do it. And the most recent work that Megan has done, I'll have to look it up. Phil was just talking to me about it yesterday, was a keynote that she gave that talked about kinning and about the way that we actually connect more broadly than just community building, but to the connections of understanding and being in kin with other organisms. So it's not all just about humanity, because we're kind of losing our way as an organism about our interdependence. And as I say that as a scientist, it sounds very flaky to me, and yet I totally understand it. And that's a core principle. So how we communicate that is going to be tricky. And still we are in the dilemma where we are doing daily things that are both unjust and incredibly ecologically damaging.
Mm-hmm. No, I see. I recently, most focus that I have been is developing these introductory courses for undergrads through an ecologically justice perspective, as well as transforming and not them being so teacher-centered, but student-centered. So the most difficult part that instructors come across is thinking through a phenomena or I don't know, a engineering design situation from a community perspective, from a perspective from eco-justice perspective. And it's very easy to fall into our old patterns as to, oh, I'm going to teach about, let's just say, earthquake, the topic, the core content, instead of flipping the script and let's say, I'm going to teach about an earthquake that happened in California and how 2 communities were impacted, and then go from there and come to the core content about the earthquake itself.
And I would say, like, from a social movement perspective, and I'm actually doing this right now. I'm helping to design a course locally here for the climate action leadership, their practitioner portfolio course. It's 9 credits for their master's degree. And so what we're doing in that is we're doing like what you're talking about. So a local justice center phenomena or different kinds of things that people want to investigate. And then part of the work in the course, so like they're not just learning, they're learning in action and for and with action. So then part of their requirement to actually get the credits is to have community collaborators evaluate them and provide feedback, and then to have their action project in community evaluated by those it served. And so like they have to do something to get the actual master's program in the world. They have to change the world in some way. So we have to shift the way we're even thinking about higher education. Every single course we're doing right now has to be about learning in and with action. Because we're done with the timeline issue.
And I still see that there's a lot of work that goes into these redesign or renovation of courses is what I would call, because it includes a lot of working with the instructor mindset, not just about how learning happens, but also how we do a community-based approach to something that they've been trained as that isolated teacher in the classroom. That approach has been there. It was one of the first things I'd learned in my core curriculum courses 10 years ago, is that the teachers are trained to be a isolated person in their classroom. They're doing it all. Same with your, college instructors. They are on tenure track. They have a particular list to fulfill, a particular goal in that they're moving. Teaching may be a part of it. Teaching might not be a part of it. Definitely thinking through a justice-centered course and then putting it in their portfolio to match their requirement. It takes a whole new systemic way of thinking. I have two instructors that I just pointed out that equity is a core agenda for their department, and they could introduce a community-based approach in their curricula, and they were like so amazed by it that they hadn't thought of it themselves. But it was right there. It was just right there. So it's 12:58. I would like to talk forever, but
I think I could listen to you forever.
So helpful today, folks. Thanks, Seth. I was actually just wondering, I don't know if I know you, Seth. So I feel like I need to I'm like all these other characters, I know them a little bit more.
Yes. Deb, we have met all of the same people. I think I'm the Teach Climate Network coordinator for Climate Generation. And so worked with, EarthGen and Becky this past summer. And then I know Kristen is pretty busy ramping up for COP. So I've popped into these when I can. So
nice. Oh, that's great to meet you. Yeah. I'm actually headed off to COP on Saturday too. So I'll see you over there.
And if I can toot Seth, I want to toot Seth's horn a little bit more. I definitely took part in the Institute this summer in many of the sessions. Seth led several of them. He takes on specialties of climate generation that is incredibly refreshing and very well done. So, I mean, there's a lot of specific areas where he, I think, contributes to our community. So,
thanks.
More of a fanfare that you can give yourself, Seth. Okay.
That's awesome.
So Seth, I want to call out this, actually, Kristen talked about this exact event on the 4th in the previous webinar on window in the COP. And definitely something I think we all can promote for the community, wider community. Do you have a ceiling on how many people you want at that event?
Not at the moment. When we start getting into those upper 80s and 90s, then I have to change a few things, but no, we don't really know how many folks will drop in. We're hoping for at least a few classrooms and just really a great way to connect with educators who are going to be at COP, experiencing it all. We've got some of our delegation, but we've been able to connect with Sarah Johnson and Wild Rose Education. We've got some folks from Hamlin University. So if you're going to be there, connect with Kristen and maybe you'll join as well.
That's great.
Thanks, Seth.
Yeah, we're all connected. We've been coordinating all of the folks on like what we're doing and where we're going. So yeah.
My WhatsApp just lit up from the coalition, just all put, you know, I'm now in there and I'm like, oh Lord, this thing is fired up, you know, but that's how knots are made, right? You know?
That's a question, if I might. I know we've got time here. Is in definition of this, that what you posted is for educators, one, right? If students are also educators, so what if you had a bunch of middle school and high school educators? What I can speak for when I talk to my students, which I will be in another class in an hour and a half, is what we're dying for is finding ways that they connect with other people who are younger than 18, who are active on education. I mean, there is a real need for that to be actively done internationally with COP. And if that's not something that meeting's done, that's fine. But no, we're really looking for that. Okay.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I'll try to see if we can get our COI conference for youth delegates, 2 of them, to see if they could join as well, because I think they could give possibly a really interesting perspective. And I know that some of our delegates are direct teachers, and so they have a little bit of experience, but they might not be able to speak exactly to the youth perspective. But I'll try to connect with our youth delegates and see if they can join as well.
You did end up getting a couple folks into COI?
Yeah, I will admit I don't know if they are for sure going or they are participating in virtual. Frank might know more.
Well, yeah, but that was being worked out during the call, and you know, but also Seth, you have Gina sitting on my screen right there, who is a youth delegate lead. I don't know if you're cool with that, Gina, who's actually part of the Wild Center's delegation. So the Wild Center delegation to COP has got a strong youth group. So that's one of the great things about the US ACE coalition, is that all of these efforts and all of their permutations are connected and now cross weaving based on events and opportunities, right? So that's I'm seeing the braiding happening in real time. So Gina, if there's I would imagine that's a fair offer, right? That the Wild Center coalition plus, you know, delegation and the, you know, climate generation delegation and the other ones that are now popping into the space. You know, the talent is moving around fluidly with purpose.
Yeah, I would love any of the folks with COI connections to keep Chris in the loop, because I'm sponsoring Chris into the space too this year, and really want her to be connected because we're just doing a ton of work, like locally and internationally.
Make sure she's in the WhatsApp.
Oh, she is.
Better, Wendy. Sorry.
You guys, I am supposed to be somewhere else too.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Great to
everyone.
connect.
Thanks
Bye.
all. Great to see you guys.
Bye.